Hi everyone, welcome back to my coding live stream. My name is Ashley Davis and I'm doing a real special coding live stream today where I'm building out a React UI component as a favor to a friend, and I decided to open source it and live stream it. I'm doing multiple live stream sessions into one day. I can't do this quickly enough to fit it in one small session, so this is session number 2. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a recap on where we got to from the last session. I started with my TypeScript template and I used that to create a new project called React Outliner. You can find this on my GitHub, GitHub Ashley Davis, React Outliner. You can clone this code or download it to follow along yourself and try this out for yourself. The README is just a copy of the template at the moment. In the future, that'll be a proper README for this project that tells you how to get up and running with it. So please check that again later. I'm going to write that README offline. I've already published this component on NPM, so you can see React Outliner is already a published NPM package. And again, the README here is from the TypeScript template project that I started with, and that will be updated a bit later into a proper project. We are currently sitting on version 0.0.1, but very soon we're going to turn this into, at the moment this is just a stub React component. It doesn't do anything except print hello world, but we're going to flesh it out to be a proper outliner that looks like workflowy. So let me just show you what workflowy looks like. You will have seen this in the last session. It's a simple note-taking thing here where we can have indented children. So we can build out, a tree of notes. I'm going to build something like this. So far, we've just created the project for it. We've put the project on GitHub. We've published it on NPM. If you want to catch up with the first session, I've already uploaded it to my YouTube channel. So if you check out YouTube, the Data Wrangler, check out playlists. You can find the Coding Livestream React Outliner. Check out the playlist there. It's literally just finished processing. So if you jumped in to look at that right now, you might still have to wait maybe a couple of minutes for that to come up. But while I'm doing this current session of the live stream, that will finish processing. Okay. So let's just have a look at the plan we had last time. So we got through milestone 1 in the first session. We're now up to milestone 2, and I want to actually turn my stub React component into an editable content component. I'm also going to show you how to use npm link to link our package up with our testbed for easy testing. I was going to get set up for TDD in this milestone, but actually I think where that's going to be useful is in the next milestone, because I don't actually think there's going to be much that I could apply automated testing to in this current session. So this milestone could be over quite quickly, and if that's the case, we're just going to move straight on to milestone 3 anyway. So let's just give you a quick review of where we got to with the React Outliner. We've created a simple React component called Outliner, and it's returning some JSX, so that's HTML in JavaScript. It's just a div with hello world, so nothing too exciting there. It's just a stub. It's just a starting point, and we're going to build this out into a proper component as we go. I built a test bed, so I'm actually still running the test bed here in my terminal from the last session. This is the code for the test bed on the left here, and then on the right is the actual thing itself. So you can see how we've got our outliner component brought into the test bed, and you can see that here that it's printing hello world. It's actually embedded in a link and like an A element here, so that's why it's got that link styling, and you can actually click on it to go to reactjs.org. But that's beside the point. So I might actually just take this opportunity just to really simplify this. So this is the stub testbed that is produced when I run the tool create React app. It's a real fast way to get started with React, and you can see how I do that in the first session if you want to catch up on YouTube. But I'm literally just going to delete a lot of stuff here and just like really simplify this. Like I don't need all that stuff. It's really this is just to show you how simple this testbed can be. I've just saved that, so now it's it looks really boring now actually. Maybe I should bring some of that back. That centers it, that's nice. So I've just brought all that back because it just looks a little bit boring, doesn't it? I mean, we can simplify this. We don't need that spinning logo, even though that looks beautiful. Okay. So that's a little bit simpler. Now it's just saying hello world. So we've got our component here that's come through npm. We've npm installed this component into this project. So this is running the way that any real project would run. Like, you can now use this outliner. You can use it in any React project just by npm installing it and including it the way we're including it just here. So what was the next? That's right. npm link is what I want to do. So I've already got two terminals open here. I'm gonna be working on this. I want to basically set this up to automatically compile as I'm typing code, and I've got an npm script already set up to do that. I think I called it build watch. I'm just going to double check that. So if we look in the package.json file here, now you can see there's a ton of scripts here in this whole section here. That all comes mostly from the TypeScript template that I started with. So it's not like I go and set this up specifically for every project that I work on. It's a good reason to start from a template because you have all that pre-configured. The thing I'm looking for here is build watch. So this build watch is what runs TypeScript in watch mode. Now I have this set up. I have these conventions set up for almost every project. So even if I'm not working in TypeScript, I'm not working with that TypeScript compiler. I could be working with Babel or some other compiler. I could be working with Grunt or some other build process. When I run npm run build or npm run build watch, I only have to remember that one command. It's just that one command, whatever project I'm working with. So this is going to run it in watch mode. So let's just test that works. So I'll just put that next to my code. And I'm going to make a small update to my code. Now you can see here, it says file change detected, and it compiled it, found no errors. Let's put an error in there. I love making errors in code. Let's just type some gibberish. That's bound to produce an error. There you go. So you can see that I'm typing code and it's automatically telling me that there's errors there. Visual Studio Code even tells me, so it's quite nice. So let's get rid of that. So I've got one terminal here that's set up for kind of my live build process. Let's call that live build. Now that's my test bed. I'll open another terminal. Actually, before I do that, before I start the test process, actually I don't even have any automated tests yet. So I was actually gonna let's just reserve this. I was actually going to run live reload tests here, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I don't even have the automated tests yet. But we'll save that for later. What I do want to do here is I want to kind of run npm link. So npm link basically takes this project and allows me to kind of live link it into another project. So now I go to my test bed. I'll just rename this as well. So I'm renaming this as my React test bed. So each of my terminals is now named, so I don't get confused by what's supposed to be happening in each one. I'm hitting Control-C to abort the server that I had running for the testbed from earlier. Now, normally if I was, this is what I did last session. I did npm install save React outliner, and that's what installed the React outliner into this project. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run npm link, and type React outliner. Enter. So this is now basically from my npm link that I did here. So you can see I did the npm link here in the actual package itself, the React outliner package, and now in the test bed I've linked that back to there. So basically there's a symbolic link set up here as well. Like you can actually see this for yourself if you go into node modules and you go into where the package is installed. Now you can see here that all the source code is here. So normally when you install this from npm, all the source code has been stripped out, and all we're left with is the compiled JavaScript in the build directory. But because I've just done an npm link, I've symbolically linked this React Outliner directory through to my actual working project. So I can actually make changes to my project, make changes, and it's going to live build. So we set up the live build. It's automatically going to produce the build directory. And that's automatically going to come through this symbolic link I just created into my testbed project and update the UI. Let's just test that this actually works. So I'm going to run npm start to start this web page. I'll get my code for it up. So now this is the code for the actual testbed, but I'm not really interested in that in the moment. I'm actually interested in the code for the component itself. If I can just get that back on screen. What have I done with it? There we go. So now I can change this. I'll change it to Hello Computer. That's a good one. If everyone knows their Star Trek references, you'll remember that. So you can see that's already filtered through. So what I've done here is I've made a change to the component. The live build has detected a file change and it's compiled it, no errors. That's compiled to the build directory. The build directory is basically symbolically linked through to the actual project itself, which also has live reload enabled. So it detects that a change to some JavaScript files has come through due to the build process. And that's why we see Hello Computer then automatically rendered in here. So I've got a nice flow now, like a nice conduit through which I can test this. I'm just going to make some changes here to the styling. Actually, I'm not even going to bother with that yet. Let's just save styling for later. What I want to do, what this project kind of hinges on is the content editable flag. So I'm going to enable that for the div. You could set that to true, but I mean when you include the flag, it just sort of defaults to setting it to true anyway. So we don't need to go to that level of verboseness. Now that change should have flowed through, and I should be able to edit this. So I've got a nice little editor already. If I could spell. But I can refresh that and I can get back my default Hello Computer that we started with here. So this is just a flag on a div. It's part of HTML. I'm turning it on using React here and my JSX, my HTML in JavaScript code. The question is, what am I going to do now? There is something that we should look at. It's not even coming up yet, so that's a problem we might see later. That's okay. Now I think I've got through this milestone. So I've got my npm link set up. So I've linked the component all the way through to the testbed for easy testing. I've created a simple content editable component. I think it's time that we got onto milestone 3. So that was quick, but quick wins are nice. They're good for our motivation and our confidence. And let's get on to milestone 3. So we're going to get set up for TDD. Probably not really TDD. I'm not really necessarily going to do test first here, but I do want to do or create automated tests for some of the important behaviors in this new component that I'm working on. Namely that I want to use the edit key to add a new item. And I want to use Control-Delete to be able to remove an item. And I want to be able to test, run automated tests to make sure these behaviors work. So let's get started with this. Get set up for TDD using Jest and Enzyme. So this is the first time. This is what my live test terminal is for, by the way, as well. This is where I'm going to run my tests. So I haven't used Enzyme before, and I haven't done any kind of unit testing on React components. I've done a fair bit of testing in other situations. And the first time I really used Enzyme was yesterday, when I was just doing a little bit of practice to make sure I had some kind of clue as to what I was doing with Enzyme. So hopefully this doesn't go horribly wrong. But if it does, it doesn't matter. We'll get through it all fine. So I'm going to install a few dev dependencies. So these are dev dependencies. We don't want to have them included in production. Typically, any kind of testing dependencies or debugging dependencies would be dev dependencies. And then, so if you want to kind of reproduce this in a production environment, you don't have all that bloat and possible security issues. You don't have all that kind of included in your production code. So I'm going to install Enzyme. I know that there's a couple of things I need. I need the TypeScript types for Enzyme. I don't really know why I need this, but I need the Enzyme adapter for React to make it work nicely, to play nicely with my React code. And I need the types for that as well. Let's see how that goes. So I'm just installing the dependencies I need to use Enzyme for testing. Oh, I got one of the names wrong. Which one was it? I think I've spelled that wrong, maybe. Adapter. So this should just take a moment. While this is installing, I'm going to start working on my first test. We're going to say pressing enter creates a new note. Let me just check my milestones here. Yeah, so part of my thing here is to basically expand the simple editable into a list of notes. So that's correct. I want to create a new note. See if that npm install has finished. So I now have Enzyme installed. Now I can't remember exactly what I've got to write for the code to initialize the adapter, the Enzyme adapter for React. So I'll come back to my cheat sheet here and copy that out. I'm not really sure why you need this. It's just something that's completely new to me, so I haven't really figured out why you need this, but you need, for this to work. Actually, before I even add this, I'll show you what happens when you don't add this. So I'll show you what the problem is first before we fix the problem. Now I can use Enzyme. I can wrap up my, for some reason they call it wrapper. I'll do a shallow wrap. You can do a deep or shallow wrap. Doing like the deep wrap basically fully simulates the virtual DOM, including all the subcomponents. To do your unit testing on a React component, though, you just basically use this shallow wrapper, so that you're only instancing your own React component. You're not necessarily going to instance any of the children of it. And we don't even have any children yet anyway. I'm not sure if we will on this for this React component. So for now, this is going to be good. So I'm going to autocomplete the outliner there. You can see that it's automatically imported the outliner from the index file in the directory above the test. Oh, so I'm getting a problem here. The first problem is that this is a TS file, not a TX file. So to use this JSX, we need to convert it to a TSX file. It doesn't know where this shallow comes from, so I'm just going to let it auto-complete that. It says auto import from Enzyme. That's what I want, which is good. So now you can see it's imported shallow from Enzyme. What doesn't it like about this? Oh, because I'm using React here, I've got to import React as well. Cool. So I've almost got a test. I might just run this now to make sure. This is where we should see the problem I was talking about earlier. So I'm just going to run npm test on this. Yeah, so so this is the problem that I was talking about earlier. Enzyme internal error. It expects an adapter to be configured, but it found none. It kind of gives you a bit of a hint there of where you can go to figure this out. And this is how I figured out how to do this. I followed this link. I read the instructions. I figured out what I needed to do. I've got that saved here in the pre-planning that I did, what I call my cheat sheet. I'm just going to put that at the top of this file. So I've imported configure from Enzyme. I've imported the adapter. But I'm not calling it. Look, I strangely enough, I did not copy across the code to actually. So I've actually got a live. I've got to go and look at this and get what I need, because I didn't actually copy this to my cheat sheet. But here's the code anyway that I'm trying to integrate. So let's take that over. Configure the adapter. Now hopefully that gives us a passing test. It's not a useful test yet, but at least we know that we've got our testing infrastructure set up to some extent. I'm just going to make sure that I've committed everything that I need to commit at this stage. So that's just package.json, my setup for React. Yeah, well, I mean, there's not enough to commit yet, so let's finish our first test at least before we do another commit. So I've created an outlet. I don't like this name wrapper. Let's just call it like element. So what I want to do, the first thing that's interesting about this is that you can call dump. Is it dump? No, debug. If I hit F12 to go to the definition of this, I can see that debug takes some options which I don't really care about. It returns a string. So I'm going to console log that string, and we can get an idea of what we've instantiated. So we've basically instantiated like kind of this shallow version of the DOM, or the element hierarchy for our outliner component. And this debug function here will show us what's in there. So I'm just going to run my test again, just so we can get that output coming out of it. So you can see here, this is what the outliner is composed of: a div with a content editable and this hello computer text. So that's a great way to kind of visually see like what's happening there, and that's going to be useful as we move on. Now I'm going to simulate a click on this using the simulate function. No, not a click. What do I want to do here? I really just want... I am actually doing test-driven development here, because I am actually preceding the code that I'm going to write with the test. I don't really know how successful this is going to be, but let's try it. So let's simulate a key down event, and we'll want to pass in here some mock event args. We'll just call it mock event. And let's just say the key is going to be enter. Now, what do we expect to happen? What do we expect to see? I think we need to have like an extra div added. But to do that, I need a parent div. So I need a parent div to contain the children. Let's make this a bit more realistic. We'll say click to edit. So what we want to do here is be able to add a new div once someone's clicked enter inside this div. So what's the best way to test this? This is where I could come unstuck, because this is something that I have not done before. I have not done TDD on a React UI element like this. I know there's a find function. So, like, I'm guessing I could like ID these, but it seems kind of wrong. Like, I could ID these as, you know, ID 0, ID 1, and this I could test that there's a new ID added there. I know what I need to do. I know what I need to do. This is where I need to introduce some props, I think. So I'll make an interface for some props. I'm gonna need some React state as well. So I'll make an interface for React state. I need to plug these into the type definition here instead of the empty sort of anonymous types I had in there previously. Now I'll make a constructor and I'll pass through the props, the initial props. So the props for a React component are really just the inputs to the component. And then we can set the state, the initial state. So I need to pass that to the superclass constructor. So the initial state is just going to be empty at the moment. We are going to need to put some interesting stuff in there soon. TSLint doesn't like that, but that's okay. Let's just put a placeholder in there at the moment. Just to stop those warnings, those errors. We'll fix that later. So I'll put it to do there to actually, there is actually going to be some proper stuff in there later. What we want to do here, maybe this is where I've sort of jumped ahead in my TDD that I don't necessarily want to do. Maybe I simply want to test my first test that I can get an existing note in there. So let's just say that I create my element like so. Let's just get this formatted nicely. And let's say we've got some notes to start with. An array of notes. We're going to have to probably expand on this soon, but hopefully this will suffice for now. So it's complaining because there is no notes property. That's what I'm going to have to add right now to fix this. So let's do that here. So we've got some initial notes there. We should copy those notes through to our state. So I'll put them in the state as well. So now we'll initialize our state from our, I'll go to that. So in the state, these are the notes that are currently displayed in the outliner. Just gotta correct my spelling there. So we're going to initialize our state, the notes in the state, from the notes in the props, or just an empty array if there are no notes passed into this in the first place. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this. I'm sort of jumping ahead of the TDD here, but it's kind of difficult to know how to proceed really. What I'm going to do because I don't really know what I'm doing here, and I'm trying to figure this out as I go. This would be a little bit different probably to how I would do it if I knew what I was doing with Enzyme and TDD of React. So I'm just going to make it do what I want. I'm going to print what it looks like at the end, and then I'm going to figure out how to write the test for it. So I need to now render a list of notes here. So that's from the state, the notes, and this is how you render kind of a list of children in React. So for each note, I'm going to render this content editable div. And the initial contents of it are going to be what's in the note. So which is just a bit of text. So now I'm going to start my live reload test watch. And I'm going to figure out how to write a test or two to actually test this. Or best if I put my testing side by side with my code there. So this is giving me an error, something I've missed in React. Warning each child has in a list should have a unique key property. So what you've got to do so that React can manage the differences between the virtual DOM and the real DOM, you've got to put this key property on every item in the list. Now I don't really have an ID or anything that I can use for a note. So what I'm going to do is the map function can have an index passed through to it. So the index of that element in the notes array. And I'm going to use that as the key. This probably isn't great. We might be able to find a better way to do that in the future. So that fixes that error. Now this is what I've got printed here from my console log. Now I could I'm gonna create another test. Now these tests aren't actually testing anything yet, because I'm yet to add the kind of the success criteria. But I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna put here a couple of notes. So we should see another console log now that's got this note 1 and note 2 in it. There we go. So we've got two content editables here, one with note 1, the other one with note 2. Now just to get all the edge conditions, the other test that I should create here is can have an empty outline, right? So we're passing in no notes here. Now, this seems like a real dodgy way to test this. Like I could literally copy this out and say expect element.debug to equal. Where's that working? There it is, to equal that div. That will get me like a proper test. It just feels a bit dodgy, kind of testing on this debug function. But let's come back to that in a minute and see if we can find a better way to fix that. This is really kind of a cheating way to do testing, because normally in test-driven development you kind of write your tests first, then you write the code to fulfill them. I'm kind of doing it the opposite way around here, and I'm writing the code, and then I'm using the behavior that I know to be correct in the code to write my tests. Except that's not going to work very well there. There is another function that I can use here instead of debug, which might be a little bit more along the lines of what I should be using, and that's the HTML function, which renders out the HTML that is produced by our React component. So you can see it's not nicely formatted. So unlike the debug function, we just get a single line of HTML, but that's going to be easier to copy into the test here. So that gives me 2 passing tests that are actually... Oh, I've broken something quite badly here. What is that? I should use a different kind of quotes here because HTML requires double quotes sometimes, so let's use that. Cool. And I basically want to do the same thing down here, but this time I'm running a test that I've got two notes added to my, and these are just the starting notes. These aren't the notes that have been added by the user. Oh, actually, that's wrong because I want to use the HTML function here. So you can see each time I'm saving this code, I've got live reload turned on for the tests, so the tests are automatically rerunning. I'm getting a warning here from React. We're going to figure that out in a moment. I don't need to worry about that too much just yet. For the moment, just while I'm trying to get this to work, I've got to remove that because that's causing that to break. So now I can copy this HTML that's got 2 notes in it, put that into my expectations in this test. I can get rid of that console log the element HTML there. So I've got 3 passing tests. Let's have a quick rundown on what's happened here. So I kind of did this testing a little bit opposite to test-driven development, and that's mainly because I'm feeling my way through this, and I don't 100% know what I'm doing with testing React components. So I'm just feeling my way through it, prototyping my way through it. I'm getting the code looking like what I want, producing the result that I want, and then I'm effectively copying that into my expectations here for my tests. I'm decided to go with the HTML function, so I'm going to switch that over to that. I'm just going to make sure after that change that my tests pass. It's very important after any change that you make to make sure that they still pass, and I have broken it. And to fix this, I just need to kind of check what it is that the HTML function is going to output here. So let's just double check that. Oh, so it's expecting kind of like a full closing tag there. So let's put that in. Cool. So now there could be a better way of testing this than testing the HTML, like using the find function to make sure that an extra div has been added. But because I don't fully know how to do that, it's a little bit hard to kind of to go down that route at the moment. So I think I've got all my passing tests, but I've got this this warning here about this thing that I've got to fix. Now, I think I made a note about this in my research document over here. Yeah, so I did Google this. I found some answers to this problem on Stack Overflow. I've got to suppress this warning. So basically, it's React warning you that it can't manage the content editable for you, but that's okay because we want to manage it. So I'm just going to put that on there to suppress that warning, and that warning is not something that bothers me or that I'm interested in. Now I think I'm ready to add this test down here that I wanted to add in the first instance. I want to be able to create a new note. So I'm creating here an outliner with no notes. So its notes are empty to start with. I'm going to simulate the key down event, pressing enter. What I should get is HTML that contains. I've actually got to start this with one note. Let's do that first. Actually, let's just get rid of this. I realised that you can't press enter in a note unless there is already a note existing. So to start with, there always has to be one note. So I need to change this first test to be an empty outliner has by default one note. So I'm still passing in no notes, but I really want this to have one note by default. So I'm gonna expect it to be something like that second test there. But it's going to be blank. Let's just say it's a blank note waiting to be edited. If I save this, I'm going to get an error because I've just changed the test to expect different behavior, but that behavior doesn't exist yet. So let's add that behavior now. So what I want to do here is, instead of if there are no notes, how are we gonna structure this? If let's just say let notes equals list.props.notes, and we can say if notes is equal to undefined, make notes be one empty note. So we're using an empty string here just to make an empty note. Otherwise, if there are no notes in, like it's an empty array like what we're passing, then it's going to be the same thing. We want to initialize it with an empty note. So we just change the way that we're initializing our state here. What's wrong with that? TS-lint has a problem with that, but it's kind of annoying actually. I want to be able to do this. So I'm gonna switch this off. So if you ever get a TS-lint rule that annoys you, and there are many of them, you can basically just go in here. I've turned off a lot of them already. I don't like using that shorthand. I don't like using that object literal shorthand. Anyway, that's an aside. That warning is gone now. Now, hopefully this. Yep, we've got all passing tests now. So this test rings true now. An empty outliner has by default one note. So we've got something that we can type enter in. Now I can simulate the enter key here, and the expectation is basically going to be the same as that previous test there, which is going to have. Let's just make this space a bit bigger. So we've basically got two notes in our expectation here. The first one is empty because the default note is empty. And the second one is going to be empty as well because we haven't typed anything in there yet. So I'm going to compile this now, run the test. Now this test should fail because we haven't added the behavior to implement this key down event yet. Now, what I want to do is, in my React component here, I want to make an on key down event, and I want to handle that, passing in the event arguments. And what are we going to do here? We're going to see if the event key is equal to enter. We're going to add a new note. Now, how are we going to do that? We actually want to do a set state. So we want to set the state of this React component to have a new notes. It's going to be the old notes concatenated with a new note. It's going to be a new empty note. Hopefully that's enough to get the behavior that we need. Let's see if the tests are gonna succeed now. No. So something interesting has happened here. Let's just comment that expectation out. Do a console log of the debug function. At the moment, I only want to run this test, so I'm going to put it.only there. So that narrows me down, restricts me down to this one test. And I'm going to see what the output is. That's interesting. So for some reason, now this might actually be because my key down, I'm not triggering this correctly. And what I want to do is just go back to my research and just have a look at how I did this the other day to make sure I can do it now. Ah, I know what I've done wrong here. So I'm actually simulating this on the root element. So I'm actually simulating this key down on this element here. What I want to do is simulate it on the element at the next level down. And I have to try and figure out how to do that. So let's say it's the first div element. I mean, it might be just as much as doing a find div. Will that find the first child? That's the question. I will do a console log on that just to check on the debug function of that. And I'm intending to simulate my key down on that div. So hopefully this will get us a little bit closer to where we need to be. It hasn't worked. But I wonder if I have to find the div underneath the div or something like that. Let me just check. So this is where I need Google to help. So I'm going to say using enzyme, how do I find the first div in a list? This is pretty specific, but there could be a pretty specific answer to this. And there is, the first one that comes up on Stack Overflow. Isn't that nice? Interesting. So it's doing it by class and choosing the first one. That's cool. That can really help. So that implies that I'm going to put a class name on this, and I'll call it note. I mean, that might be useful for styling later anyway. And I want to find a note, the first one. Maybe we'll call this first note now to make it a little bit more meaningful name. Does this get us the passing test? That is the question. Not yet, but well, the test is failing at least now, I think, only because it's got this class note in it that I need to add. So this is what's going to make this code a little bit brittle, and using HTML to do this testing, it feels like it's going to be a little bit brittle, but I don't have any better solution at the moment, so let's just add that into each one. This is probably going to break the rest of the tests as well. That's what I mean by brittle. Like, I don't really care for testing that this is there, but it's going to break all my other tests. So I should really find a better way to deal with that. Cool. So I'm going to bring my other tests. I'm going to remove this only function here now, and bring my other tests back online, which should fail. All the other tests should fail because I need to put that class name in there. Yep. So I've got 3 failed. The one we just fixed is passing. So let's get these other tests working. Just copying this class name into each of my other ones. So we should basically now, hopefully these tests will all pass, we should basically now have a basic editable list. We can't delete items from it yet, but we can add items. And make sure my build is passing. So my build is passing. I want to go into the outliner testbed now, and I'm going to see if this thing actually works. We can't see anything there because we could find it using inspect element, but because there is no default, there is no thing there. So I'm just going to type. Actually, I might call this default note. So I'm just going to factor out this default note. I'll make that a variable at the top here. And I'll say the default mode is click to edit, just so I can see what I'm doing. This is going to break all my tests, but I'll set it back in a second anyway. So I expect this to break the test, so I just want to check. Yep. Oh, 2 are passing though, and 2 are failing. But now I should see click to edit. How cool is that? I can edit this. If I hit enter, drum roll please. Yeah. Well, it didn't focus. It didn't focus the next note. So we'll call that note 2. I've got to put some code in there to focus note 2. That will come shortly. So we're building. We've almost got milestone 3 complete, I think. Here, let's check. So we've got set up for TDD. I mean, it's not a perfect setup yet. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with enzyme. I've expanded the simple editable to a list. We can use the enter key to add a new item. We can't delete an item yet. The other thing we wanted to do here was to focus the newly created note. But that's it for this session. It's almost been another hour. So I'm going to be back in 10 to 15 minutes. There we go. We're going to continue this in 10 to 15 minutes, so please don't go away, or I fully understand if you've got other things you need to do with your night or your day. And all this is going on YouTube anyway. So come back 10, 15 minutes or catch up later on YouTube, and we're going to finish milestone 3. We're going to finish this list, and then we're going to add drag and drop to turn it into a drag rearrangeable list. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.